The moment everything seemed to change wasn't dramatic. There was no shocking outburst or headline-making confrontation. It was quiet, so subtle that many people missed it the first time. But once you notice it, the pattern becomes difficult to overlook. Because this isn't about a single uncomfortable interview or one awkward exchange. It's about a series of moments where Meghan Markle faced remarkably simple questions, and her answers often became the center of the conversation. These weren't complicated political questions or legal challenges requiring carefully crafted responses. They were personal, straightforward prompts that invited clear and direct answers. Yet, time after time, the responses appeared to wander into broader themes before eventually circling back, if they returned to the original question at all. What began as simple conversations often became lengthy explanations that left many viewers wondering whether the question had actually been answered. The first example takes us to Washington, D.C., at the Fortune Summit. Surrounded by entrepreneurs, executives, and business leaders, Meghan Markle stepped onto the stage in what seemed like the perfect environment to discuss leadership and success. The moderator asked a simple question: how do you distinguish constructive criticism from background noise? It was an opportunity to offer a memorable insight. Instead, the response explored ideas about protecting personal energy, setting boundaries, and focusing on positivity before ultimately returning to the importance of support from others. For many viewers, the answer felt less like a direct response and more like a shift away from the original question. As the discussion continued, some observers felt the conversation became less focused. Rather than providing greater clarity, the exchange seemed to raise even more questions. When the discussion moved toward measurable results, analytics, and business performance, specific examples appeared limited. In a room where achievements are often supported by numbers and concrete outcomes, critics argued that the lack of measurable details became increasingly noticeable. The next stop is a podcast interview. The atmosphere is relaxed, friendly, and conversational. The host offers what appears to be an easy opportunity for reflection, asking a simple question. If you could rewrite your public story, what would you change? For many public figures, this kind of question invites honesty, self-reflection, or an acknowledgement of lessons learned. Instead, the answer focused largely on how others had shaped the public narrative. Rather than discussing personal decisions, the conversation shifted toward the responsibility of outside voices to tell the story differently. Commentators reacted in a familiar way. Many saw the response as another example of avoiding direct personal accountability. Another moment gained attention because of what some viewers considered an inconsistency. During a 2016 interview, Meghan explained that she had no interest in creating a luxury lifestyle brand centered around expensive products. She even described high-priced candles and similar items as unnecessary and inconsistent with the image she wanted to present. Instead, she emphasized products that felt accessible and relatable. Years later, premium lifestyle products became closely associated with her brand. Whether that represents changing priorities, business evolution, or a contradiction is something audiences continue to debate. Regardless of the interpretation, the comparison naturally invited discussion. Then came one of the simplest questions imaginable. During a relaxed interview, Meghan was asked, "Do you think you'll be married forever?" For most people, the answer might simply be yes. She did answer positively, but the response expanded into a longer discussion about Prince Harry, his personality, his appearance, and the qualities she admired most about him. To some viewers, the extended explanation seemed unnecessary for such a straightforward question, reinforcing the impression that simple answers often became much longer narratives. By now, the pattern had become increasingly difficult for critics to ignore. It was no longer about a single interview. It was about repetition. Straightforward questions frequently led to broad, carefully framed responses that drifted away from the original point before eventually returning, if they returned at all. The pattern continued inside the kitchen. A lifestyle brand built around cooking, entertaining, and home life naturally creates certain expectations. So when Meghan was asked about her favorite dish to prepare, many expected a specific answer. Instead, the conversation moved through favorite ingredients, fresh herbs, flavors, cooking inspiration, and general preferences without ever clearly identifying one favorite meal. For viewers expecting a simple response, it became another example often highlighted in online discussions. Then another widely discussed moment unfolded. During an International Women's Day panel featuring several accomplished women, Meghan was invited to briefly share a childhood experience about advocating for women. She returned to the now well-known dish soap story. What began as a short anecdote gradually expanded, revisiting familiar details and extending longer than some audience members expected. As the story continued, portions of the audience appeared less engaged before Brooke Shields lightened the mood with humor and moved the discussion forward. Many commentators interpreted the interruption as an attempt to reset the pace of the conversation after audience attention appeared to fade. In the days that followed, discussions centered less on the message itself and more on the length of the story. Critics argued that an example intended to demonstrate determination instead became another illustration of over-explaining a relatively simple point. Another memorable interview took place inside a bookstore. The setting encouraged thoughtful discussion about literature, storytelling, and personal reflection. Early in the conversation, Meghan casually mentioned that she had not been reading many books lately, explaining that most of her reading centered on parenting resources and language learning materials. Moments later, however, the conversation shifted toward storytelling, identity, and the importance of finding one's voice. The ideas were presented confidently and thoughtfully. Yet some viewers felt the earlier comment created an unexpected contrast that made the message feel less convincing than the setting itself suggested. The interview eventually turned toward criticism. Asked how she handles mixed public reactions, Meghan had another opportunity to respond directly. Instead of addressing specific criticisms, the conversation focused on the motivations behind criticism itself, suggesting that not every public reaction necessarily reflects genuine opinion. For some observers, this reflected another recurring communication pattern. Rather than engaging with the criticism directly, the focus appeared to move toward examining the critics themselves. The discussion later shifted to motherhood. Meghan described recording bedtime stories so her children could hear her voice whenever she traveled. The gesture was presented as thoughtful and deeply personal. At the same time, some commentators questioned whether describing such efforts as exceptional might feel disconnected from families who experience long separations without access to similar resources. Whether audiences viewed the story as heartfelt or out of touch depended largely on their own perspective, but it quickly became another topic of debate. Finally came perhaps the most personal question of all. What does self-care look like? Rather than describing a personal routine or habit, the answer broadened into caring for family, supporting loved ones, and helping others. Once again, some viewers noticed the response gradually moved away from the original question before arriving somewhere entirely different. Viewed individually, none of these interviews may seem especially significant. But when considered together, critics argue they reveal a consistent communication style. One where simple questions often receive expansive, carefully framed answers instead of concise responses. 10 interviews. 10 opportunities to answer straightforward questions. 10 moments that continue to fuel discussion across social media and online commentary. Whether these exchanges reflect thoughtful communication, the pressures of constant media attention, or simply a tendency to elaborate remains open to interpretation. But one thing is certain, they continue to spark conversation. And perhaps that leads to the biggest question of all: if the simplest questions generate this much debate, what happens when the questions become even more challenging?